Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Vitali, and welcome to Psychic Podcast. I'm so excited to have as my guest on today, my very good friend, Don the Dragon Wilson. He's considered one of the greatest kickboxing champions in the history of our sport. I consider him the greatest. Now, while he was fighting in the ring, he was an actor at the same time, and he's also considered one of the greatest American martial arts actor during our era at the same time. Now, you could just imagine because of his comprehensive resume, his career, I've decided to break up this interview into two parts. Today, we'll discuss his martial arts and kickboxing history. And then I hope everybody tunes in for part two, the interview, where we'll discuss and focus on his movies and upcoming projects. Please, everybody, welcome my good friend, Don the Dragon Wilson. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Keith, I'm doing very good today. Everything's going good so far.
Well, you look great. And I just want to tell all the fans out there, you have fans from all over the world, and they'll be tuning into this, that you not only look good, but you stay in shape. We spoke the other day, and you had to put me on hold because you were hitting the heavy bag at the time. You just always stay in shape. You just, I guess, waiting for fights to come up.
Well, look, no, you know what? I love martial arts. Nobody has to force me to go to the gym to for some reason. I don't know why, but I love punching and kicking the heavy bag. I love it. And I couldn't imagine anything more fun than to rush over to the gym and hit the bag for an hour and come home.
Well, let me do this. We have so many people that's going to be tuning into this. You have so many fans. My goodness. People love you and have respect for you. I consider you royalty. You know, there's Chuck Norris, there's people like Cynthia Rothrock, and you. You have represented our sport with so much class and dignity. I respect no one more than you in our sport. But let me just throw some numbers out, and then we're going to get back to how you started as a martial artist, but these numbers are overwhelming. They're so impressive. And sometimes these numbers, people just go, well, they're just numbers. But watch this. You you fought for 4 decades. Now, everybody, that's called 40 years, 4 decades. And I'm gonna have to read some of this off. You had a 72 win record with 47 knockouts. Now, I'm just guessing, I could be wrong. Take all the greats of our era. Take, Troy Dorsey and Joe Lewis, Bill Wallace, and take Joe Lewis, Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith. I'm not talking about Benny Urquidez at this time. Take all those and all their fight wins together, and they were all the best of all time for their weight classes. They still didn't have as many knockouts. At fights as you had knockouts. You had more knockouts than they had fights. Now, Benny Urquidez is the only one that had 60 wins, and he's could be considered one of the best of all time, if not the best as well. But guess
Yep.
what? He fought one weight class only. Let me tell you what you did. You had 10 titles in three different weight classes. Not one, three different weight classes. I used to marvel. I've watched you fight full contact myself, kickboxing. And I go, how are you fighting a light heavyweight and then next fight fighting a gigantic heavyweight? And also, this is pretty cool. You held your record as a light heavyweight for 12 years without being beaten. You know, you are the equivalent of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic in tennis. They held their records for like 12 years. That's who you are. You are our Federer in our sport and our history. So but if it's you or Benny, guess what? There's millions of martial artists. We got it down to two now. Two of you are the top of all time, just like that. So I'm just so proud to have watched you fight during your time and consider you a good friend. But let's go back to your beginning. What encouraged you and motivated you to walk into your school the first time?
My brother did. My brother was a black belt before I take first lesson. And we used to spar with boxing gloves on before we knew anything about martial arts or boxing or anything. We just did it for fun. And I was at the Coast Guard Academy at the time. I was 17 years old, going to the Coast Guard Academy. And my brother had already become a black belt by then. And so one day I was on leave on the Coast Guard, and I was in Florida, and we sparred a little bit. And he said he's going to throw a few kicks. And I didn't have any respect for martial arts or kicks. So I said, yeah, go ahead, throw any kicks you want. He's basically probably 155 pound, junior middleweight. And I was at the time 205. And I mean solid. I played football, basketball. I was an athlete. And And he basically, even as a lightweight, just kicked me all over the. And you can imagine, you as a black belt going against a white belt, you wouldn't worry about
Right.
him if he was a heavyweight because they don't know what they're doing, beginners. And I didn't know what I was doing. My brother basically, I tell people the way I explain it, I said, he made a believer out of me. He made me see the value of kicking, how you can be good with your hands, you can be in shape, you can be strong, but you cannot deal with kicks where they're coming to the body. He didn't kick in the legs back then because he was he was trained in the PKA style. It's all waist up, but he kicked me. I believe he kicked me a few times in the head too. So when you learn from a black belt that it's effective, then I wanted to learn it myself. And that started me in my road to martial arts. I tell people I turn a negative into a positive. I got my rear end handed to me and it turned me into a martial artist.
Well, I consider you one of the greatest of all. Everybody does. Because, but get this, one of the reasons is because of your background. Can you tell the listeners about your different sports you played in before
Well, I
you
was playing
participated?
yes, I played football and basketball. I was an MVP of my high school basketball team and MVP of the high school football team. And then I wrestled in college. I did track and field in high school as well. I forgot that part, but I took shot put, discus, ran the high hurdles, sprint medley. So I was an athlete. And then, like I said, I wrestled 2 years in college. I also at Coast Guard Academy played football and basketball there. So I actually did three collegiate sports at the collegiate level. Uh, and so I was an overall athlete. So I had that going for me when I started martial arts. I wasn't like coming right off the street, having never done a
Right.
push up and never done a run a wind sprint and then studied martial arts. And so I think I took to it faster than the average person because of my skill in other sports. And uh, now, when I look at back, I was a pretty good basketball player, football player, but I'm so much better. What I was born to do is punch and kick. And if the MMA had been around, I was also a pretty accomplished wrestler. You know,
Well, how about that?
my second year as wrestler in college, I took fourth place in the state of Florida. I think in our other interview, I might have said second or third place, but no, I was fourth place. I made an error in my memory, but yeah, but that's still pretty good, for your second year as a wrestler to be fourth in the state of Florida at 177. So, I excelled in sports and I looked at kickboxing and martial arts as kind of a sport. Although, martial arts is much more than a sport. It is a way of life, is what I tell people. Ultimately, it's a way of life. You want to get the most out of your body, your mind, your spirit, reach as close to what we would consider perfection as possible in our lives.
Well, how impressive is so you telling me you didn't wrestle in junior high or high
Oh
school?
no, my first day of
So
wrestling was in college, which the athletic director said is impossible. You do not start a sport at the
right.
collegiate level because they're all state national champions in high school. They get the full scholarships. But I was an athlete, and they had to do is show me the rules. I had a usually a guy tries out, but I had a 2 week tryout. Basically, the coach just wanted to see if I could learn how to wrestle quickly because I'm starting at the collegiate level. So the guys I'm wrestling against, and they're 4 year colleges. Even though I went to a junior college, we wrestled the 4 years, University of Florida, Miami, Florida State University. Wrestled the big guys. So I went from no wrestling to wrestling. Um, who's the state champion is the guy who beat me in the state tournament. That's why I placed fourth because I had to wrestle him. So um, he had gone to nationals the year before. He was a great wrestler at 177, and he did beat me. And but I could have been, I believe I could have been a very successful wrestler had it not been for kickboxing because I started kickboxing in 1974, and I actually turned pro. I say, my first fight was a pro fight, $100 if you call that pro fight. But I started out as a pro, but all the fighters in those days did. The top point fighters back then were Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith, Joe Lewis. They all became world champion kickboxers. They made it the goal and they did it. So it shows that point fighting is part of learning the speed, the defense, the movement, timing, strategy. It's part of the ingredient you need to become a successful kickboxer. Or I know there's been kickboxers who never point fought that became champions, but for me, I really valued the point fighting because I believe my defense was a level higher than the guys I was fighting. The ones that were never point fighters, um, you can hit them with your first technique,
Right.
and with me, because of the point fighting, the first thing you throw at me is not going to touch me. I'm going to be on the other side of the ring, or I'm going to close the gap, and I'll be right on top of them. I'll be too close or too far, and
Huh.
so that's the way my career went. I traditional martial arts, point fighting, to kickboxing.
Well, think about this. You said it perfectly. Name any champion in kickboxing that didn't have a point background. Name. You can't name one of them. I can't name one of them.
No,
They
all
might
the
have
original,
competed.
all the original ones. Yeah.
Right.
Today
Yeah.
they can have them. They come off the street. They learn how to throw
Yeah.
a
Now
left
it's
hook, a right
MMA. Yeah.
cross, left side roundhouse kick.
Yeah.
Eventually become champions. But in the beginning, see, I'm what they call old school, or they even call us classic. We came from traditional martial arts and
Right.
became champions. Now today, they have a group that just comes from,
Yeah.
for their first day in the gym is they put on gloves and hand wraps, work the heavy bag, and they like boxers. Kickboxers are now closer to the backgrounds of boxers. They just want to learn how to
Right.
fight.
Yeah. There's still some fighters that compete. Um, there's I'm sorry, Wonder Boy,
Yep.
Ray Thompson's son, Steve Thompson. He does phenomenal, just incredible martial arts. He was a great point fighter, made a transition to
But
MMA,
does he
UFC.
go back and forth? Does he ever go back and do point fighting?
Yeah, no, but get this. I don't think he's become a world champion yet, but he's in the top 5 in UFC for Dana White. But
Okay.
he has a big fan following. Why? Because he just doesn't fall to the ground and get people in headlocks. He's doing beautiful techniques
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and people love the aesthetic beauty of the martial
Yeah.
arts. And I all the greats, Benny Urquidez, yourself, Joe Lewis, Jeff Smith, Bill Wallace, Troy Dorsey, all the great fighters, all were winners in point fighting first and then made the
Yep.
transition, all had that beautiful technique, and, so that was really great. I'm just in my mind, I was a track runner in college, so I'm a collegiate
Uh-huh.
runner. I couldn't imagine going to college and go, "Guess what I wanna be today? I just wanna be a track star." And then the coach goes, "Come on, let's try it," and then be one of the 4 best in the country or whatever in track. No, you gotta start early and then be developed the whole time. Every sport, name any sport, basketball, swimming, name only one sport I think I could have done it in. I don't wanna brag, but I think curling. One with the broom and the hockey. I think I could have gone straight into college and played that sport. I would have been the sweeper. I would have had the broom, and I'm pretty sure I could excel as with the sweeper. But other than that sport, nobody that I've ever heard of could go straight to college
Well,
and
they
then
said
excel.
the guy said it was impossible. The athletic director, not
Yes.
the wrestling coach. The wrestling coach knew a friend of mine and knew about my athletic background. So, you I believe in his mind, he thought, listen, if the guy's just has desire, he's already got an athletic background, I can teach him how to wrestle. And he can just, be a kind of like a mediocre guy who wrestles. But, when you get a scholarship, you got to perform. Because they can offer that around the country and get some good high school wrestlers, right? So for me
Yeah.
to get the scholarship, I was very lucky and I appreciated it and I did the best I could for 2 years. And the only reason I didn't, well, like I said, I liked wrestling, I like grappling. That's why the MMA would not have been something I would have avoided if it had been around in the '80s when I was a young fighter. Of course, I would have done it. This is, because it follows the Bruce Lee philosophy of mixing the martial arts. He
Right.
believed, and being a Bruce Lee fan, I don't know if you have, but I'm a little obsessive with things. I read every word's ever been said, every word he said. As a matter of fact, I went to Curtis Wong uh, when I first moved to LA. He had a magazine called Inside Kung Fu, and
I
he
know.
invited me to his office. It was in LA, and I had just moved here, and he had literally he kept it locked away, home videos of Bruce Lee training that nobody else had. I guess Linda Lee gave it to him. I think actually he might have been a personal friend of Bruce Lee's, Curtis Wong. I never asked him that, but anyway, He said, Don, I cannot let these out of my office. I want you to sit and watch Bruce Lee train. And then you're a real fighter. You tell me if he was real or not. And so I watched videos that nobody's ever seen. I don't, maybe people saw clips or whatever, because he did video a lot of it. His bag work, he did so many things that I've never seen anybody do. Rather than just do weightlifting, you know what he used to do is he would get a bar and it would be static, right? He'd put both his forearms under it and start putting pressure up in the air that- where you couldn't move it. But he did isometric. There's no movement. He just did that. And because I believed he believed it, that he values explosive power, explosive strength. And so he would go against put resistance against an immovable object. It would be literally like a pole, and he'd push it like this. It's not like going through the full motion like lifting weights. He mixed that kind of training with his training. The other thing is this: in his house, and this must have driven Linda Lee crazy. uh, He would put hanging from different areas of the living room, let's say, or his hallway, X-ray paper. X-ray paper, the film that they make an
Sure.
X-ray. It's kind of like flexible bracket. It would be hanging from a string, and he would walk in the hallway, and he just stops in the middle, and he goes, "Wow, wow, wow." He throws 6 punches in like a second and a half, and he hits every one of them. Bing, 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 bing. Like, that's a little crazy. I mean, my wife would kick me out of the house if I started hanging stuff all over but he believed you need to be ready at all times. And the control you have to hit that paper quickly, but not tear the string or anything, but he would just go wham. Well, maybe he was using, I didn't even think about it. Maybe he's using some kind of fish line, because there are strong fish tension on a, f- a line. Like if you're going to catch tuna fish, that's going to have some tension on it, because a tuna fish is a big fish. Anyway, but Bruce Lee used to do that. And I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. He believed mixing things. So early in my career, because I started in the early 70s, 72. Early in my career, I started mixing things. I trained with Taekwondo guys. I went to boxing gyms. Bill Wallace actually really encouraged me to learn how to box. And so 1978, I started going to boxing gyms. But so I started training as an MMA guy before it would even exist. And it was literally because of the philosophy of Bruce Lee. He said, study everything. In the end, you'll have your own personal style.
You know, I don't think anyone understands our generation, the impact Bruce Lee had on all of us. You
Right.
know, I get this. I too had the X-ray papers hanging up where I would do round kicks and snap them and punch them. I was so we were all so just inspired by this great man. And Curtis Wong was a friend of mine, and I remember going in to take a cover shot for a magazine. I brought Mike Stone, so he's on the cover with me for this magazine. And my partner in all the photos, because I did a book for him as well, is James Liu. And James Liu was just starting out, so it's kinda historic back then to have Mike Stone and James Liu and Curtis Wong, but just hearing these wonderful stories about Bruce Lee and the impact he had. So really, you really credit Bill Wallace as one of your instructors there, or somebody
Yes.
who had an impact on your life.
Yeah, yeah, because he had a unique, he throughout his whole career, and even to this day, there's nobody who can duplicate what he could do. He fought with one leg, one hand, 90% of the time. Now he did throw, I think he's occasionally throwing a back legged roundhouse kick and maybe even a right hand, but he pretty much was left-handed. He put his left hand, lead hand forward, and his left leg, he could use that like another arm. And he mixed those two things up, and I kind of stole a little bit of that from him. I tell people, if you want to have your students and you learn martial arts that help me be successful, get Benny Urquidez and Bill Superfoot Walsh to teach seminars to your students. And I said, because I took their seminars and I did everything they said. I didn't just listen and go as one ear and out the other. Benny said things and Bill, and I copied them both. And then in the end, I added some things on my own that,
Sure.
but mainly those two guys. because you can't find two more successful guys at the style
No,
they fought.
not on this planet.
No, because
Get
both
this.
of them race to the top, but do they fight alike? No, nothing alike. They don't
No,
look
the
alike.
opposites.
Right.
Well,
Benny
get
throws
this.
spin kicks, jump kicks, and he's good with both hands. And Bill was one sided, one leg, one kick. They, two totally different styles. And I took what I felt was valuable. If I hadn't known Keith Vitali, I'm definitely I would have sparred with you. I would have stole all kinds of your speed, your timing, where you are when you throw a certain techniques or whatever. Whatever you hit me with, I would try to take a little bit of it.
Yeah.
I could use it. You know,
Well, guess what? In hindsight, I regret not having worked out with you because guess what? I trained with Benny Urquidez and I trained with Bill Wallace. And Benny, of
right,
course, Benny is so versatile and he can hit you with everything. And Bill Wallace is limited what he's going to hit you with, but guess what? It doesn't matter. You can't stop it. He's going to
right,
hit you either with that left hook or left leg. Doesn't matter. And he can say, "What are you going to do about it?" No, I spent a lot of time with Bill Wallace too. And one time I said, "Did you ever fight Don Wilson?" He goes, "No, but I did do a match with him where I some kind of
oh, we
exhibition or
did
got in the ring with you."
exhibitions.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he said, I said, "Well, tell me about what you think." Now, I've seen Don fight, and I always wanted to know. I said, "Why didn't you guys fight each other?" Well, he goes like this. He says, "Let me tell you why Don was so successful. It's not only his sidekick, his movement, but he just had an acute sense of timing. He could just be there, then not be there. He could just get just outside your range, and then he had long legs and good kicks." And he goes, "That timing and that all that was just he was just an incredible athlete at the same time." So, he really respected you. Now, I consider Bill Wallace probably the best athlete ever in our sport for kickboxing,
Well,
just
he's a
athletics
great
wise.
wrestler as well. Great wrestler, Bill
Yep.
Ball. He would have taken to MMA very quickly
I
if they'd.
and yeah, and hold up, think about Joe Louis. Joe Louis probably would have eaten the
Well,
MMA fighters up.
those
He was
guys
a great
build, they're
fighter.
strong, they're tough. You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
would have liked the MMA as well. You know, it is really the culmination of what Bruce Lee's philosophy was. Add the grappling arts to the striking art.
Right.
Because in a street fight, it's not always going to be, so you're not going to have your movement, your speed you have in tournaments because the guy might grab you. And that's part of the training, though. That's what
Depending upon yeah.
you train on that with point fighting, and I didn't train that way with kickboxing. We didn't have the grappling, but if it had existed, um, I'm sure I would have done it. You know, because it is part of self defense. I believe me, I used a lot of that kind of technique when I was bouncer in a nightclub because I could manipulate guys and leverage them. You know, there's a lot of strength involved in wrestling as well, and there's a grip. People don't understand when a wrestler grabs you, it's a different grip. When I grab somebody, it's a wrestling grip. The average guy cannot get out of. I grab, and I'm sure haven't studied Aikido, I haven't studied jujitsu, but I'm sure they're using similar techniques because how many wrestlers have become successful at MMA? Randy Couture, Matt Hughes. I
Right.
mean, when they become champions of MMA, and their background is not from boxing, kickboxing, martial arts. It's just wrestling. So wrestling is a form of martial arts, and
Right.
taken to it. Bill would have taken to it. Joe Lewis. We all we wrestled competitively.
Well,
All
you guys were the foundation, the precursor for MMA, and they should have royalty. They should have like 5% of their paychecks going to you fighters because you were the foundation which built their stature, UFC and MMA and all their types of fights. But guarantee you this, you know, when people say, "Well, we're much better than those fighters. We're the newer fighters. We're faster, stronger, quicker." And that these
there's a
old
lot of
fighters.
truth to that. There's a lot of
Yeah,
truth
but
to that.
guess what?
But
It's truth. That's a general statement, but I would take you, Benny Urquidez, Joe Louis, Jeff Smith, and Bill Wallace. I would take you, transfer you if I could magically to this time, and let you compete in UFC, and you would all be champions today. I think
oh, I
every one of
do
you would be.
well. We're gonna do well. You know, I don't want to say we're gonna beat the guys of today, but we do well because we are athletes. You know,
Right?
Joe Louis was an athlete. You know, you just look at his build, you can see he's athletic, and the way he was
No kidding.
220 pounds in his youth, all muscle and fast. He could win
Yeah.
point fight, right? And same with Bill Wallace and those guys. You know, Bill Wallace was a wrestler first, by the way. He went to
Right.
judo, and then he hurt his knee, and that he couldn't do the judo anymore, so he went to martial arts, or not martial arts, but you might have been Goju. I'm not exactly sure which art he started with. I know he worked with no, it was Kempo, I believe. He worked with Ed Parker because he was one of the Elvis instructors. Bill was in Memphis.
Right. Right.
Yes. Well, I believe it was Kempo at the time. But anyway, Bill went from being a grappler, a wrestler, to being a judo man, which is grappling, right? It's about grabbing. Judo
Nice.
guys don't
Right.
hit each other with elbows and knees; they grapple. And so those guys already proved, and I believe I proved I was pretty good with grappling because I took fourth in the state my second year as a wrestler in collegiate intercollegiate wrestler. So if you would have taught me jujitsu, I think I would have picked it up. Hey, look, I was going to fight Royce Gracie back in the old days when the UFC was going on. I was an announcer, and so I did some judo train or jujitsu training. I would work with one of the Machado brothers.
Right.
They're another a family from Brazil that teaches their own kind of version of jujitsu, and I work with them. And I work only on defense. I didn't want to submit my opponent because I figured on the stand up, I will decapitate any of those wrestlers, Mad Hughes, any of those guys try to go with hands and feet with me. They're good. It's gonna be short. So I figured if they grab me, I want to be able to not be submitted on the ground. So I only work defense. But and the guy would submit me. In the beginning, he would submit me quick. And by I think we worked up maybe a couple of months, 2 months, 3 months. By the later month, by 2 or 3 months, he couldn't submit me. Now, so I picked it up fast. You know, you don't let a guy get on your back. You don't let him get under your chin. You don't extend your any limb, whether it's your arm or your leg. If it gets straight, there's a way they can quickly lock it up and then go against the joint. So you got to stay, um, to a certain degree. Uh, you got to have your defensive cap on, even if you're not going to use the grappling as a finishing technique. You got to be able to defend yourself, right? Because you may go to the ground, and so that's what I did. And yeah, I only trained a few months because they end up UFC did not want to. They didn't want to take a chance on their champion getting beat by an old guy like me, an old kickboxer. You know, they were trying to say
Right.
this is on a whole nother level. And so it wasn't me though. I said yes to fighting Royce Gracie. I said
Yeah.
yes to fighting Matt Hughes for their top dogs at the time, and it they didn't come through. And people who know me know. If you offer me enough money right now today, I'll go out in the parking lot and fight. You know, I'm a
That's
mercenary.
you.
The money is
Yep.
right. I will go out there. Now, I'm not going to guarantee I'm going to win because you cannot guarantee anything in the fight game. It just the odds are based on my
Right.
background, whatever. I either gonna win or gonna lose. But it's unpredictable. The fight, you know. I tell people the guy with the worst record I ever fought in 28 years knocked me out in the first round. That's Glenn McMorris,
That's it.
underrated fighter. Yeah, if what I say this though, Glenn McMorris was a pretty accomplished point fighter. That means he's got speed, technique, timing, and that's what he did. I was throwing a
Just
back
called
like
him
a
as well.
roundhouse kick.
Oh
It was
yeah.
a slow. I was trying to hit him with power, so it was a little slower than what a point fighter would throw. He jumped right in with a right hand, hit me right on the chin. Keep first round. It was on ESPN. Basically, they said this is a tune-up bout because his record was. I want to get this right. 9-6. Now 9-6 against the number one contender. Glenn, what if you were going to gamble? Would you bet on Glenn?
No.
9 wins,
My
six
goodness.
losses? No. So here's what happens though. He hits me right on the chin. I go down so hard that I scuffed my face, and it was real canvas back in those days. It wasn't any fake. when I got up, there was blood in my eye, and I just yelled at the referee. He headbutted me in my stupor. And
Right.
so I always tell fighters, keep your mouth shut when you get knocked out because whatever comes out is not going to be good. Don't say anything to the referee. So I said he headbutted, and the referee stopped the fight immediately because if you get hit with the right hand and you think it's a headbutt, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be in the ring fighting anymore. You're obviously your brain is not with you, right? So Steve Shepard was the referee. He stopped the fight, and Glenn McMorris from there, he was 10-6 at the time. He had 3 more fights, Keith. He got knocked out 3 times in a row and retired with a 10-9 record. And for the rest of his life, he can say, I knocked Don Wilson out first round.
Yeah,
And
but
you know what?
he's the only one.
He's the only one, but he wouldn't be lying.
Yeah, but get this,
So
I fought him myself, and he was a great point fighter.
what
So
he
you're
said, he
right.
was
You never
like
know.
you. He wasn't like you, but he
Don't
was
take these guys for granted because these point fighters they have technique. You add speed and power behind the technique, and one lucky blow can happen. But like you said, but you had 47 knockouts of your own.
I'm
Nobody
gonna
will
ask you a
knock you out
question right
again.
here. I'm gonna ask you a question. You've seen these guys where they're both shoulders are they're in a wrestling stance, basically. Randy Couture and these guys, they get right in front of you and they're all their weight is forward, their hands are up on the because they're watching the roundhouse and the roundhouse kick like this, but a straight punch. Now with those tiny gloves, you tell me you couldn't hit him with a back fist?
Right.
Well, Machida hit Randy Couture with a jump front kick right in the face and retired Randy. He got out of kickbox or got out of MMA. How many times have you seen how often would you get a jump front kick hit you in the face?
This
Come
is
on. What? You would be on the other side of the ring if I jumped up in the air, my
right.
foot
Right.
started coming up.
Yeah.
So there's something about point fighting that gives you a level of defense that is above. And Randy Couture is he's in the Hall of Fame for the UFC. He's one of the top guys, and his career ended by a jump front kick in the face. Hit him clean. Boom. And you don't need a combination when you do that, right? Keith, how many point fights, black belt level, have you seen a black belt, somebody score a jump front kick on you in the face?
Actually, never. Never.
Never. Because your
Never.
defense, as soon as I
Right.
jump up, you're going to be on the other side of the ring.
Right. I
And
always saw
so
this.
we need to respect MMA and take what's good from MMA. But never forget, when they asked Bruce Lee what his most dangerous technique was, Keith, he said his finger jabs to the eyes.
Oh,
Because it
wow.
doesn't matter that Michael J. White just had a interview where he said he just too big for Bruce Lee. He just knocked him right out. He's 220, 30 pounds, and Bruce Lee's 145. But if Bruce Lee goes for Michael's eyes, I pretty much know that a welterweight like Bruce Lee, who is a superhuman body, he's built his body, he's so fast, and those fingers, he's the guy who does the two finger push ups, right? I
Wow.
can't do that. I can't do push ups on two fingers. That means he has trained his fingers to be solid when he goes for those eyes. Do you believe who's faster, Michael J. White or Bruce Lee? I believe Bruce Lee's faster. And that's not for watching movies, that's for watching his home videos, which I told you I saw. And he believes that explosive thing. That's why he would do those isometric exercises to explode into a punch, resistance, resistance, and then you take it off. Wham! I believe he'd get your eyes. Now, Michael J. White does not hit the heavy bag with a blindfold on. So he's not going to be able to fight with both eyes. And I can't fight with no eyes. Can you fight without any eyes?
Well, it's
I
actually the difference of a real fight. Yeah, in a real fight or in the
in a
ring. Now, the
real
ring,
like right in that
yeah,
situation, self defense. You cannot say I'm just going to win because I'm bigger.
yeah. But let me tell you what I do like about Michael J. White. I mean, he's a good friend of mine as
He's a
well.
great guy. I love the
He,
guy.
well, no, he is a martial artist first, and he
He's an
has
actor,
wonderful technique, speed,
great actor too.
power. Yeah, and he has, he's humble, but he has great technique. Now, I've seen so much film of him, and I've been around him a good bit myself, and I just think he's just another representative, just a great representative of martial arts. Whereas I don't think
Well, don't
MMA
say something
fighters.
negative about him by saying that
Oh,
he
I
should.
know.
But
I know, but when I do look at the MMA fighters and all of those, it's not that I don't have respect. I do have respect for them. I think they're great, fantastic fighters, but I don't hold them in the same regard as I do martial artists. Martial artists are disciplined, respectful, courteous. They have those, and you don't see that really with all the fighters in UFC.
He, I've talked about this with Benny. Um, the fighters make more money today because of pay per view. It's all pay per view dollar. They're not getting bigger audiences than we have because we have big audiences. But the, these guys build the fights up by cussing each other out. Literally, I'm saying their language is. Do you know any black belt that would get in front of a class and that kind of a foul language would be coming out?
Not at all.
And did
No.
you ever Bill Wallace badmouth his opponent for like a month before the fight? That's promotion. They call that promoting the fight. Conor McGregor getting around saying nasty stuff to people, and the other guy going to punch each other at the weigh-ins, things like that. I mean, Kate, we start
Yeah.
our fights by bowing. Now, I believe they did that in the point fighting too, right? Before you
Of
start,
course.
you
Of
start,
course. Yeah.
you look at your opponent, you bow. That's respect.
Yeah.
We start with respect. If you don't have respect, and you're putting down the guy's religion. Look, I've even had fighters, they badmouth each other's girlfriends and things. It just gets so personal, Keith, that it's very distasteful for me. And I wouldn't want my young child to watch that and say, now that's the way you gotta be. You gotta be like Conor McGregor. Take a trash can and throw it at a bus, breaks the glass goes into the bus. These are fighters, and cuts some of the women fighters. That
God, that's yeah.
well, well,
That's why I
now
say
he is
it's
a
apples
great
and
fighter.
oranges. Yeah.
He's a great fighter. You and I are not saying anything against their fighting ability, but martial arts
Right.
is more than just that. It's an
Exactly. It's a
example
way of
of
life.
it's a way of life, and it's a way of improving yourself over a period of
Right.
time. Now, you improve yourself with your relationships, with your money problems, with your education, with your self defense, health. It's improvement of your as a human being. Along with that comes the fighting ability, but it's not all the fighting.
That's my favorite kick. Right in the nose. Maybe sometimes in the stomach.
Whoa.
Hook kick.
You back?
Good. 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 Well, so I just want to say that I think you, and I mentioned this before, I think you and somebody like Chuck Norris are great ambassadors of our sport. It's what the martial arts is all about, what we represent. If I was the president of the United States, I would mandate martial arts be taught all the way up through some kindergarten, all the way up. I'm not talking about fighting, but the leadership training,
Yes.
learning about
Yeah, but
discipline, courtesy, respect for others. I think it's so needed in this country today, and I just that's why I love the old fighters from our era, and not old, I mean, from this era. All martial artists today represent courtesy and respect and all the tenets of the martial arts. And again, I don't compare UFC fighters and all the different fights like that. It's apples and oranges. They're like gladiators. They come from a
yeah, they're
different
fighters.
world.
They're fighters. That's true.
Right. And they're not all of them, but none of them represent who I want my kids to grow up to be. I don't want them to grow up to be like them. I don't want them having tattoos on their eyes and rings in their nose and all. I mean, who cares? But I like Ronda Rousey. I like Gina
Yeah.
Carano. I like John Jones. And there's some good fighters that I really like, but I separate them at all. Let me just talk about your career again. I, who was your toughest full contact fight? Your
Oh,
kickboxing fight.
um, there were a lot of them were tough. A lot of them were tough, and some of them were tough. Not so much because of the fighters, although they were good. I fought Dennis Alexio. I had the flu. I had literally a fever. And people ask me, I couldn't breathe out of my nose, so it makes it hard when you put the mouthpiece in. If your nose is plugged up because you got the flu, it's pretty hard to breathe. But people ask me, well, how sick were you when you fought Dennis Alexio? And I said, I'll tell you exactly how sick I am. And Keith, you're going to know how sick I am by me explaining to you. before the fight, it's in Miami. I'm in a hotel room, and they don't tell people my room number because people would bother you. They want you to be, I got a world title fight on NBC Sports World, so I want to be alone. And somebody's knocking on my door, and I'm thinking, well, how the heck did anybody find out what room I'm in? Because I said I don't want to be bothered by anybody. I open up the door. It's Chuck Norris. He goes, Don. He goes, I'm going to take you out to dinner, the best seafood restaurant in Miami. And I go, this is the night before the fight. I go, Chuck, I'm sorry. I'm just too sick. I'm laying in bed. I'm sweating. I got a fever. I got Vicks Vapor Rub all over my face. And Chuck looks at me and goes, well, how are you going to fight? And I said, I'm just going to fight. I said, I couldn't back out of the fight. It's NBC Sports World. And it would just ruin kickboxing if I don't fight. I got to fight this guy. And so I fought Alexio with the flu. Now, so that makes it the hardest thing. Now, I'm not saying he's the toughest guy, but that wasn't a hard thing for me. Now, other fights I've had injuries gone into them, which makes them difficult. And then there's also the like James Waring. I got no excuse against Waring except for one thing. My style does not work good when you're 6'4" because I'm a head kicker. That opens up a lot of stuff for me. Well, you know what? A guy who's 6'4", when they got their hands and they lean back, Keith, you can't. If you can touch them with your foot, you might score a point in the tournament, but you're not going
Right,
to
right.
knock. Their head's got to be down a little bit where I put the power in the kicks. But so different guys made it difficult. But overall, after 28 years, I would say the guy closest to who I respect and made was difficult for me, and I got no excuses for that fight. I had no injuries, no sickness. I was ready. Was Johnny Terrio. Johnny Terrio, in my mind, we fought. It was called a draw at the end. I thought I was ahead on points. I'm not a judge. I'm not a judge. Maybe I wasn't ahead on points, but it was so close. Um, and I will say this, years later, I look back and I think, well, we had a rematch clause. So we should have settled it, right? I mean, what better rematch? How many people you think would have came? First of all, it's sold out. First one. Sold out in Montreal, in his hometown. And when it's called a draw, and it was close, that means everybody who was there wants to see it again. And even are going to tell their friends, that's great. They're going to say, who's going to win it? How would you know for a fact Johnny's the winner, me, when we both fought 12 rounds and it was that close, Keith? It was close enough to where now I look back, I think, yeah, well, it was close. I can't
Still,
complain.
that's a feather in your
But
cap to gone
that was
12 rounds with him.
my big rival was Johnny's.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. He was, during his time, Joe Corley really touted him with his PKA as his number one fighter.
He was.
I guess with Rick Rufus, those were the two he promoted the heaviest. After Bill Wallace and Joe Lewis and all those, Jeff Smith got out. But those were
Now,
the
Rick
two.
got a win over Johnny's, though. Rick, they fought. Very close fight. I was the announcers for Showtime. That fight, though, was Johnny's I was already retired. He was past his prime as a
Gotcha.
fighter. And Rick Rufus is in a bigger weight class. He was bigger than Johnny's.
Yeah.
Hefner. So he younger and bigger gave him a little bit of an edge to win a decision against Johnny. But he did get the decision. But if he had fought Johnny's in 1984 and he'd come in Johnny's weight,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been. I don't believe it would still been close. It'd be competitive. But so that to me that doesn't put any dust on Johnny's record. Is that he has a loss with Rick Rufus, a decision close. Um, yeah.
Yeah, but
So Rick was a
listen,
great fighter, though. Rick was a great fighter, though, no doubt about it. Great fighter.
when Rick was a child, his dad sent him over to train with me. As a kid, he'd stay in the house and I'd take him over to karate school. And, he was only like 10, 12 years old and we'd train together. And then I saw him grow up in the martial arts. And, I saw all these guys. I'm so fortunate, so blessed that I was around all you guys, the Chuck Norrises, Joe Lewis's, all those guys. And,
You're
and
George
I
with Joe
think that's,
Corley.
yeah. And also with Corley, speaking about Joe Corley, he's restarting the PKA. What's your thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
he is the um, one of the hardest working guys I've ever met, and actually, more honorable than probably 99.99% of people in the fight game because he actually tells the truth. There's no, he admitted to me that he thought I won that fight against John Eves. Joe Corley said it to me, yeah, and that was his guy, though. Like you said, that was the guy that put all the eggs in the basket. He basically came in. Bill Wallace was the main famous guy, super. He retires. John Eves got Bill's title. He
Right.
filled those shoes and he filled them good in his own way. He was a puncher. Bill was a kicker, right? So he did it his own way. But uh, I believe Joe has actually thought, he scored the fight himself unofficially. Um, and he felt, listen, it was close enough where he didn't say, "Oh, you got your rear end handed to you." He- I'm not gonna have him quoted as saying Don definitely beat. No, no, I didn't definitely do anything. It was close enough. You can go either way, Keith. You can watch the fight on YouTube. It's on there. And one day you can watch it and say, you know what, I think Johnny's actually did outpoint Don. And then you can watch it another day and say, you know what, maybe Don scored a little more punches. So it's that close, Keith. And Joe Corley was, but his honesty as a icon in the martial arts was the fact that, yeah, he would be the last person that would be comfortable saying his premier champion might have lost the fight when we fought each other, you know. But he did say it to me one time, and uh, yeah, I think it's a sad thing that the WKA and the PKA had such different rules. You could
Right.
never have a unification like they do WBC, WBA. See, boxing, they have an advantage over us as a sport because the rules are the same worldwide in boxing. Worldwide, same thing. No holding, no elbows. The rules are the same. But in kickboxing, they're different everywhere, right? You can kick the legs, you can't kick the legs. You can hold the head, you can't hold elbows. Kickboxing was not a generic term for all the sports that I did. You know,
Which of the titles are you the most proud of? Now, get this. You fought for, I'm going to read these letters out. They mean nothing, but these are organizations. You
yeah,
won
they're for
titles.
international
And
organizations.
I mean, you won titles in ISCA, IFK, PKA, STAR, WKA, WKC, Kick. I mean, you name it, you won it.
But it
But
was the
which one were you the
WKA.
proudest of?
It was
WK?
WKA. And one of the reasons is they were the ones that had the fights in Japan. And I'm Japanese. I had 3 fights in Japan, which is, I guess that's what made the decision for me to go to the WKA was that they had competition in Japan. And I'm Japanese, and I wanted to take my mother and my brother and everything, and all this go to Japan for fights. And I did. I had 3 fights there. So that's the one. And I held it for 10 years. Won it in 1980 and retired it in 1990. The WKA light heavyweight title was my that's my claim to fame as a fighter. Now I did win, like you said, I won other titles. Kick is a legitimate association. IKF was when I came out of retirement. I fought for their cruiserweight title, and I went. I'm not disrespecting. I don't want to diss any association, but just personally, and it might be Keith because it's the first one. Like, what's the first grand championship you ever won? Do you remember?
Grand, yeah, Battle of Atlanta. Yeah, I remember.
A battle. Well, you couldn't get a better one than Battle of Atlanta anyway. But does it have a little place in your heart? First
It
one.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
So my first world title was the WK light heavyweight, and look, I don't know how many times you defended your title there, how many times you came back, but I did have it for 10 years, and I would defend it every year because there's a requirement. If you don't fight the number one contender every year, you can be stripped of the title. So, but when you have multiple titles, Keith, now you've got multiple title defenses required every year. And they don't pick the easy guys, right? It's guys who have proven themselves. They're number one or number two or number three. They're way up there. The association will make you fight them. And it's not fair. It's not fair for me to sit on a title. Like I could have held it 10 years, Keith, by doing this. I just don't defend the title against the best guys. Defend it against number 9 or number 8 or number. So yeah, that I had a little pull in the fact that I was popular, which means the TV liked me. I had a good style, a flashy style, and uh, audiences. I always sell out the crowds and stuff, but I didn't ever take advantage of it by saying, no, I won't fight Dennis. Like I said, no, I won't fight Maurice Smith. No, I won't fight James Waring. I won't fight these top notch contenders. I didn't duck the tough guys. In other words,
You duck anybody. And there's a layman perspective, people that are either beginners in the martial arts or not even in the martial arts, so they have their opinion. And then there's expert opinions like mine. I fought both points and full contact. I was like 8-1. I lost only one fight in a split decision. But let me tell you something. I held the title 3 years as a point fighter, as the number one fighter in the country. So when I think of you fighting for 4 decades, when I think of all the titles that you have, I won the battle twice, and Bill Wallace won it twice. I think we were the only ones at that time. That's great. I mean, because 'cause you're going against the great champions of all weight classes. No, you did this for 40
awesome,
years.
awesome. Keith, you got judges, right? Well, the judges
Yeah,
they vary because if you don't knock the guy out in my sport, you might lose a decision if the guy lasts, right?
exactly.
Okay. In your sport, you can't knock him out. If you knock him out, you're going to get disqualified for too much contact. So you've got to be so clear with your scoring that it's
Right.
obvious to the judges, and they would be under too much stress from the audience to give it to the other guy. If you kick a guy in the face and if the audience sees it, the judges go, they don't throw those flags. No. You had more pressure, I believe, as a point fighter than I would have as a kickboxer. All the fights I fought in Europe, I fought champions in their countries. If it was close, Keith, I wouldn't have came out with all
No, that's
wins.
exactly right.
I'm fighting the German champion in Berlin, the Italian champion in Rome, the,
Awesome.
the British champion in London. It,
Yeah.
and listen, the truth is, if a fight is close, you can't complain because the, they saw it one way or another way because that's the nature of the sport I did. If I don't knock them out, I have to accept 3 guys that I've never met, and I guarantee you, most of them never had a fight. Right? They're
That's
just
it.
spectators,
Right,
and
right.
and I didn't know their names because Keith, if they told me their names, I wouldn't know who they were anyway. Right? What's 3 strangers around ringside decide if you won or not. And that's
Get
the
this.
sport I did. I said that's what so I didn't I felt uncomfortable about just scoring points and moving, scoring points and moving. So I had the pressure that I better hurt these guys, if not knock them out. And I did. I knocked down all the Europeans I fought. You know,
Well,
uh,
here's the thing. We had so many similarities. Now, I again, I wish I could go
yeah,
back in
I was
time and just
sidekick.
have worked out with you. But here's what we used. We were both sidekickers. We both had timing and movement, but we used our sidekick defensively. But we scored
Oh,
with kicks to the
counter.
head. And it's
Yeah.
the kick. We get him, drop with those elbows, and we would score. Now, I would touch mine, you would knock yours out. That's the big difference. Like Benny Keaton, people would knock his out as well. Well, listen, I just want to thank you so much. This has been fantastic for me because I have the highest respect for you as a fighter. And again, I just told the audience my perspective from an expert perspective. You're the best of all time in my book. So I want to thank you for being my guest, and I hope everybody stays tuned for the second interview. We're gonna focus on your movies. But for now, I want you to, if you like this episode, I want you to like it and share it. Please leave a comment, and then I'll try to do my best to reply to it. And then, of course, subscribe. And until then, ciao.
Thank you. Bye bye.